Welcome to a new episode of Delphine Circle, where we uncover the mind, body, and spirit of success. Subscribe now for free to receive updates on the latest interviews. Then, sit back, relax, and tune in. Anthony, welcome to the Circle.
Thank you for having me.
So happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
Well, we got to meet recently through our mutual friend, Jason Ellis, former guest, king of covers, Jason.
King of covers, yes.
Were you one of his models?
No. He has not asked me to shoot as of yet, so we'll see.
Maybe the day's
maybe
still
soon.
young. You never know.
He has shot at my office before, but he has not shot me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, very cool. Before we get into politics, I want to talk a little bit about where you come from and your current role as president and CEO of Traffic. We talked a little bit about this. I love advertising. I used to work for an advertising agency, DGWB Advertising, and I happen to know that it's not always easy work.
Sure.
I think people look at advertising, they see the creative aspect of it, but there's also a very strategic aspect of advertising, and it actually can be very difficult work. So how did you get into the advertising business?
It was actually, funny enough, I was working in telecom. I was a level 5 network engineer. So I'll back up a little farther. When I started my family young, I needed a job to pay the bills. So I went to go work for Pacific Bell, which eventually became SBC. But I was working in telecom when telecom was a utility. And then I got the data bug and I started to get fascinated by technology. So I took a job as a network engineer for WorldCom, which was one of the biggest tech companies on the planet at the time. And as a network engineer, that was during the time of the dot-coms. So dot-coms were sprouting up, the internet was booming. And so we would have to go and sit in meetings at these dot-coms where they were talking about transferring data and around the world, but their advertising agencies were present a lot of times. And they were talking about strategies, they were talking about positioning. And I had a sales background, and I would always sit in those rooms and think about how I would do it differently, how I could do that better. That's not the right position. That's not, and so I would always, I learned early on, advertising is really just sales. It's really just positioning a product or a service in a way that you create a transaction. So I was frustrated with what I was seeing. I said I could do that better. And it was way more creative than what I was doing. And I started to lose my love for technology. And because of the entrepreneurial background, my grandfather came to this country from Cuba, became an entrepreneur. My father was an entrepreneur. I decided to put the passion for creativity and sales together with starting my own company. So 20 years ago, I started Traffic, which was in a small little 200 square foot little office in Downey, California. I can only fit an IKEA desk, a fax machine, a computer, the yellow pages, and a phone.
What else do you need, man?
What else do you need? I mean, that was before Google, so the yellow pages was Google back then. So I started the company 20 years ago in this small little shop. At the time, we were just a design firm doing marketing, trying to take any job we possibly could. And I built that company up over the next 20 years to what Inc. magazine just called one of the fastest growing privately held companies in America.
My gosh,
so it's a long
congratulations.
long journey.
Very cool. Well, I do know that agencies tend to have like little segments or niches. I mean, you're either like a creative agency or a strategic agency, a media-based agency, or you're industry specific. Do you guys have a niche that you fall into?
We don't have a specific niche. There are a lot of agencies that are digital agencies, media agencies, creative shops. Because when we started, it was all traditional TV, radio, print, outdoor, out-of-home, direct mail. And then about 10, 12 years ago, transitioned into digital. We decided to actually keep all those services in play. And so we're really a full service agency. All of our services are done in-house. So we create content, we do branding work, we do messaging, e-commerce based work. So we don't have a niche. However, we do play very well in certain industries. So the technology industry, the EDU space, and the healthcare space are probably our biggest markets.
Those are good clients to have, right? Good work if you can get it, as they say.
Healthcare is actually recession-proof. I believe it's nuclear-proof. As we've seen fluctuations with automotive, retail, beauty, cosmetic, all of those industries, the one true consistent industry has been healthcare. Everyone will always need healthcare. And healthcare has been recession-proof. So, yeah, we do well in the healthcare industry.
Great. I do think that one of the hallmarks of advertising is you have to truly understand your audience, right? We spend a lot of time in terms of strategy and really digging down. And I couldn't help but think about your transition into your current role. How much do you think your advertising background has helped prepare you for politics?
So what is our job in advertising? It's really bridging the gap between the heart and the mind, right? So we call that the 18-inch chasm. I learned this one day at church. My pastor was talking about how sometimes we miss a relationship with God because of the 18 inches between our brain and our heart. And I actually brought that into our industry, into our office. It's one of our mantras. Our job is to bridge the gap between the heart and mind. And so we've spent the last 20 years really connecting brands with consumers, right, on a meaningful level. So I think that applies greatly to what I'm doing because it's really about understanding policies. It's really understanding government's role and how to connect with those that elect people into office. And so bridging that gap and not forgetting that these individuals are elected by the people for the people. So I think it's going to play well. And I think it gives me the ability to connect at a real authentic way that separates me from politicians, which I'm not.
Yeah. You come across very authentic, and in our conversations, I believe that that's really who you are. So I'm super happy and thinking you're going to go far in this.
Hope so.
So what would make a successful entrepreneur with a young family take on the inordinate task of running for governor?
I'll tell you, I'll paint a picture for you because it was a couple of weeks. I get asked that question all the time. Why in the world would you do this, right? Coming off of 2020, we had just been named one of the fastest growing companies in America. Family's doing well, marriage is thriving. And it was about a couple of weeks ago, I said, I need to figure out how to articulate this in a way that people will understand. I'm a visual person, right? And so this is the best way to explain it. In coming into 21, we had the pandemic we thought was behind us, had a stellar year in business, family doing well, and on paper, everything seemed like it was perfect. But as I came into 21, I describe it as smelling smoke. We had cut the biggest tax check we'd ever cut in our life. I was having a conversation with my wife, and I said, where's this money going? We don't see any of it in return. We're not seeing it in our schools. We're not seeing it in our streets. What are we doing? Where's the money going? We had my daughter at public school at the time, and I started to see some of the things that were being taught in school. I started to say, since when does school take it upon themselves to teach these type of topics to our kids that should be spoken about at our dinner table? I started to see churches still closed. I started to see businesses that were closed in 2020 that would never reopen again. And so all this smoke turned into fire. At one point, I could only see fire. California was burning. In my eyes, I looked at it and said, this house is on fire. It's going to collapse, and I have absolutely no hope for it. So I told my family, we got to go. We got to get out of this burning house. Let's go. And I mentally started to run for the curb. That curb was Florida, like a lot of other people. Texas, Florida, Ohio, anywhere but here. And my wife, during the course of a month, said to me, you need to stop, and you really need to think about what we're leaving behind. And I was reluctant, and I said, no. I said, I'm a forward thinker. House is on fire. We got to get to safety. She says, no, you really need to think about what we're leaving behind. Reluctant again. And finally, I conceded. And the visualization I can paint is when I turned back around and looked at what I was leaving behind, I didn't just see a house on fire anymore. I saw a house on fire with 40 million people trapped inside. And then as I looked at those 40 million people, I started to identify very familiar faces. I saw my mom, my dad, my nephews, my nieces, our church, my employees, our community. And I realized that those people couldn't just up and leave like me. And that if I left, I would be leaving them all behind. And what does that show my kids? That because we can leave, we should. When things get tough, you run. And so ultimately, I realized that God was wrestling with me and telling me, hey, I need you to run back into this house and save as many people as you can. And that's why we got into this race.
Wow. That's a great answer. That's powerful.
It's an authentic answer. That's,
I think that so many people are having the same thoughts that you are. It's like, this is bad. How do we get out of it? And I commend you for having such a thoughtful response and caring so much about people. And I think that's the exact type of leadership we need, for sure.
Yeah, I realized that it wasn't going to necessarily be a politician that was going to pull us out. I realized that we needed to rise up. There's a big movement of parents that are getting activated, involved, going to school boards, rallying, really starting to say, hey, our future is in our hands. Yeah. And I believe our country was founded on the idea that people wouldn't be lifelong politicians, that people would be elected into office that were relevant at that point in time to do a very specific job, and then to get out of the way and let somebody else who was relevant at that time carry the torch. So got into it because I believe that we need something more than a governor, more than a politician. I think California needs a CEO because you're talking about the 6th largest economy on the planet. Mm-hmm. I think California needs a father or a mother, but a parent to understand personally what a lot of Californians are going through. I think California needs somebody that stands on firm biblical conservative values, because if you think about what's happening to our state, it's not about politics. There's an evil agenda going around that defies politics, and I can't figure out why, but it's going to take more than just me running back into that house. There's too many floors. There's too many people. And so I'm hopeful that I inspire others to identify how they can get into this fight, what tools, resources, life experiences they have to actually get involved and to take back our state.
It's definitely going to require us coming together.
Mm-hmm.
You are running on the Republican ticket. How do you position yourself in terms of the spectrum from conservative to liberal?
I identify myself as a conservative first and foremost. It happens to be running on the Republican ticket because I believe that both parties are flawed. And I believe that both parties right now are trying to identify the things that divide us more so than the things that unite us. And I want to create a middle. I want to create a pathway where people can say, this isn't about politics. This is about our way of life. I'm not interested in Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. I'm not interested in any of that. I want to sit down and have real conversations and say, let's talk about our daily life. Let's talk about our kids. Let's talk about our businesses. Let's talk about our streets. Let's talk about our taxes. And let's not use titles. And so I'm hoping that I can create a pathway where people on both sides will say, I really like that he's left politics out of this. I really like that he has a whole different perspective on it. He's a businessman, a father. He believes in the family. He believes in family first agenda. I want people to see my campaign as something that they can get behind because it doesn't fall into the traditional lines of left, right, because that's what divides us. And I think that we need to start identifying the things that unite us and start to ignore the things that divide us so that we can actually bring, peace and togetherness and unity back to our state.
What do you think is the biggest issue facing our state?
So my grandfather fled communist Cuba in the 50s. So he came to this country to pursue the American dream. He came because of freedom, the liberties we have here, the God-given inalienable rights that we have. See, government didn't give us the freedoms that we have now. God did. Our Creator did. Those are God-given inalienable rights. And I think the biggest attack right now in California and the nation is really an attack on our freedom. I think the most obvious example of that is the medical freedom conversation and us losing bodily autonomy, the ability to make decisions on what goes into our body or what goes into the body of our children. That's just one example, but that is an example of overreaching big government trying to take what is not theirs to take. They didn't give it to us in the first place. So I think the biggest problem facing California is really the attack on our freedoms and our liberties, which manifests itself in an attack against our children and our families. And I believe there's just an agenda to divide us, and that's what I'm fighting most to protect.
I have so many topics I want to ask you about. So
Sure.
What I'm going to do is just kind of go through and bullet point and just give me your 1 minute response or whatever you can on this. Are our economy and state taxation? I'll throw those all in kind of one header.
We pay more taxes than any other state in the country, double that of New York, which is second place. And that is the reason why companies are leaving California by the droves, right? Intel, headquartered here in California, just announced that they're going to build a $20 billion manufacturing plant in Ohio. They're going to create 3,000 jobs and a lot of tax money. The reason why they're not building here, the reason why they're not creating jobs here is because of our tax situation. We pay way too many taxes. So the goal is to make California the most business-friendly state possible. Reduce our gas taxes, reduce our income taxes, stop punishing big corporations and entrepreneurs who are creating jobs and funding our economy, because if they leave, it puts unnecessary tax burden on the middle class.
We've seen a huge increase in violent client crime recently. How do we fix that?
We start letting police be police again. We start prosecuting crimes. We stop early release from our prisons, and we do away with no cash bail. We're basically telling criminals, if you commit a crime, we're going to tell the police to stand down. If you happen to commit a crime that you get arrested for, but for whatever reason you don't have the money to pay for bail, for whatever reason, your economic status, we're going to let you out, no cash bail. And then if you do get prosecuted and you do get sentenced, well, we're going to do an early release. And we're putting criminals back into our streets. So just by reversing those policies, we can create a safe society. And a safe society is a sustainable society.
Pandemic policies.
Day one, before I eat my first lunch in office, we lift the state of emergency and we end all mandates across the state at a state level and a local level, because the government shouldn't be so overreaching and that they start to leverage and institute mandates that are unconstitutional. I'm not against protecting society. I'm not against personal choices as it pertains to even the vaccination conversation. More than half the people I know, including members of my family, are vaccinated. I have no problem with it. I have a problem with the government telling you that you have to do one thing or another. And so it's about lifting the mandates. It's about lifting the state of emergency. And one step further, our government at a federal and state level right now have a one-track solution for addressing the pandemic. It's getting vaccinated. But what about all the other options available to us? How about teaching people how to have a healthy immune system, to eat better, to get off of the high-risk list? How about vaccinations being a solution, but how about all of the therapeutics that you can take once you do contract the virus, and all the things that you can do that the government is limiting? So for me, it's about choices. It's about giving everybody the education, the information they need to make the most sound decisions with their physician and their family, and to pull government out of those conversations.
Public schools.
Public schools are broken. My daughter is homeschooled now. So there's two solutions for a public school. The short-term solution is school choice, giving parents the ability and allowing the money to follow the kids. So parents who are not comfortable sending their kids to public school can opt for alternative solutions, and the state will back it, because as a taxpayer, you're funding it anyway. So school choice, while we completely revamp our education system. So if you think about our education system and kind of the curriculum that exists today, it was intended for farmers and women that were never going to go out into the workforce. And it's never changed. We need to create a leadership academy, masterclass-based, teacher-assisted, where we start to teach individuals how to invest, about real estate, about entrepreneurialism, in engineering, inventing. So my idea for schools, the future of schools, is to, once you get into high school, have a masterclass curriculum from the brightest and best minds in the world that's teacher-guided to educate people and our children, so that when they come out of high school, they're ready to enter into the workforce, completely equipped to be the next generation of leaders.
Sounds good to me. Sign me up, man. Illegal immigration.
So I'm Hispanic, and my grandfather came to this country legally. I understand the significance and importance of America and California being an open country. But it has to be a country and a state of laws. And there has to be a process. And I believe firmly in securing our borders. And I believe firmly in people following a process and a protocol to be here. Just because, and as an employer, I've hired a lot of people they're from around the world that are here on visas. They come on student visas, then they get work visas, and they follow the process. A lot of times they lose their visa status and they have to go back. Why is it just because you can walk across our border, you should be entitled to more rights than those that have to fly? And so I believe in strong borders, and I believe in a welcoming country and state, but I believe in strong immigration laws. Like I said, my grandfather came to this country as an immigrant. If we were a closed society, I wouldn't be here today. But he did so the right way.
Well, good answers, man. Seems like you've might have done this before. We also do a little thing here called the big questions.
Sure.
And they actually don't seem that big after asking you all those. But this is designed to help dig down and maybe uncover a little bit more about the man.
Sure.
Give me an idea about your daily routine.
So the only thing routine about my day is really the prayer time that I have in the shower every morning. That is probably the most consistent thing about my day. That's how I start my day. I start my day in prayer. I start my day spending time quieting my soul, asking for guidance, and really preparing my heart and my mind for the day ahead. Beyond that, my days are pretty much chaotic, but I kind of like it that way. I like the fluidity of my days. Even before I got into the political realm as an entrepreneur, I mean, your days can be, you can go in 100 directions. It's not for everybody, but I thrive in that environment of not really knowing what my day is going to hold. But being anchored in my morning prayer, being anchored in my faith allows me to face all of those audibles, we call them, courageously, confidently, and intentionally.
How long have you been doing that?
As long as I can remember. I'll tell it quickly, but I had a radical experience with God about 24 years ago now. So my mom's family was Christian, my dad's family was Catholic. I grew up with my mom's family. I was always around church. Always had God a part of my life. He wasn't the center of my life until about 24 years ago. We given birth to our first son, Christian, and he was 1 month old. We went down to San Diego. It was our first outing out of the house. And we were in the car, and we were going to pick up some fast food at night. And my wife was in the back seat with Christian. And I guess he had fallen asleep, so she tried to nudge him awake, and he didn't respond. So she nudged him again, and he didn't respond. And so all of a sudden, she let out the most god-awful cry I'd ever heard a human being scream in my entire life, even to this day. I finally reached a point in that vehicle where I knew there was nothing else I can do. It's a weird thing, and as a parent, maybe you understand it, but I realized that I had reached the end of what I could do to fix this situation, and I felt like I had lost him in the car. So at that point, I was more concerned about his soul. So I lifted him up in the car, lifeless, and I said to God, he is no longer my own. I openly and freely give him to you. Please receive him in Jesus' name. And no sooner did I say that did he respond. He reacted. My wife freaked out. I screamed. She got in the car. We're driving through these dark streets. I kid you not. Dark alley, look up, there's a lit cross. It happened to be Mercy Hospital in San Diego. She follows the cross. We go in, 3 days at the hospital. They cannot duplicate it. They cannot tell us what happened. It was just, no doctor could tell us what had happened, and it never repeated itself. But in that hospital in San Diego, you have 2 young adults. God was a part of their life, not the center. We were far enough from our family that they didn't make the drive. So we were isolated in a hospital room, just her and I, with our son. That was God's way of saying, I don't want to be a part of your life anymore. I want to be the center of your life. And so from that moment on, we moved him from the fringe to the center. He's become the center of everything that we do, whether it's a political campaign, starting my company, parenting, whatever it is. And so I've been doing that routine of making sure that I start and end my day in that place since then. And that radical experience changed me forever.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I got a little teary-eyed, but
I think people look at me now that I meet and they see the run for governor, they see the successful company, they see our family, and they probably think he comes from success, or he comes from wealth, or it got handed to him. But when I started the company, like a year before I started the company, and we had two small, well, she was actually pregnant at the time, my wife. We were eating hamburger helper without the meat because we couldn't afford the ground beef. So we were in an apartment, hamburger helper, no ground beef. Our coffee table was a cardboard box. Our sofa was a kid's sofa that she had brought with her that she had since she was 10 years old. Our dining table was a plastic dining table from Thrifty's, which is now Rite Aid, but those plastic outdoor dining sets, that was our dining table. And our refrigerator was gifted to us. It was somebody's refrigerator from the garage. It didn't even work half the time. Those were our humble beginnings. We had nothing. Electricity constantly being turned off. I remember our very first car was a Honda Civic. The first week we had it, I crashed the hood. The insurance company sent us a $900 check to fix it. And it was really fix the car or eat, fix the car or eat. 5 years we had that car, and when we turned it back in, it still had the dent on it because we had not made enough money to actually fix it. So 20 years later, my life is different now, but it came with a lot of sacrifice, a lot of hard work, sleepless nights. And I don't know that people would look at me now and understand that that was where I started. So that was probably something most people wouldn't know.
what's the purpose of life? Why do you think we're here?
I think we're here to live in the fullness and the authority that God's given us. I believe that we all have a purpose. I believe that our time here on earth is to identify ways in which we could be more like Him in every way, loving on each other, developing who we are. But I believe that it's really an opportunity for us to pour into what is to come. And He's given us an opportunity to say, I'm going to give you some time separate and away from me, so that when you come back to me, the treasures that I have for you and what you'll have for eternity will be based on who you were during that time, that small blink of an eye amount of time that I've given you to interact with others. And I think that's ultimately what we're here to do.
Very well put. I like that one. Tell me something you used to believe but you don't anymore.
Something I used to believe and I don't anymore. I used to believe that we were born sinful, that we were sinful people by birth, just sinners. And I don't believe that anymore. I believe that sin is a nature. And I believe that we could actually live a life that's sin-free. That's not mistake-free. But I believe that we can live a life that is righteous. And I don't believe that we're just born that way. I believe we make decisions throughout our life. They may classify us that way, but I believe that we can make intentional decisions every day to deny ourselves of making decisions that are hurtful, not only to us, but to others.
You're deep, man. I love it. My friend and former guest, Ann Dunsmore, was the campaign manager for the Recall Gavin Newsom campaign. As we now know, he avoided being recalled by a 64-36 margin. All of Southern California, the Bay Area, and the coastal counties voted to keep him. Central California, most of the rural Northern California counties voted to oust him. What did we learn from that? What was our takeaway?
It was the biggest recall in history, most amount of numbers. Our governor had an opportunity to look at it and say, hey, I've heard you. I'm glad that I'm still in office, but I heard you. And so I want to engage. I want to open up dialogue. I want to have conversations. And let's see if we can do better. And in essence, immediately following the recall, the day after, Los Angeles County implemented a vaccine verification and passport system. 4 days later, our governor implemented a bill or signed a bill that would allow 11 and 12-year-olds to get sex changes and abortions on their parents' insurance without consent. And when I look at that, that's not better. In fact, he is just doing more of what created the momentum behind the recalls. So it says a lot. But I think this November will say a lot more.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Anthony. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Delphine Circle. Don't forget to subscribe. It's free and it will help us keep these incredible interviews coming your way. Here are 2 other episodes you may enjoy. I'm Delphine. Welcome to my circle.